Today's fun fact of the day has to do with books. Did you know that loving how old books smell has actually a name? It's called bibliomania. It's quite common, picking up a book and smelling it. That unique smell comes from a chemical reaction that takes place over time, which is why it's only there in old books. Two components, cellulose and linen, break down to form this aromatic chemical. The fragrance is described as sweet, almondy, flowery with a hint of vanilla. I think Baskin-Robbins needs to come out with a flavor like this. Can you imagine? Bibliomania ice cream flavor. I think it's going to be a huge hit. Anyway, this yummy smell actually has a purpose. You see, scientists use these chemicals that are being produced to date the book, so they can date it back to when it was actually written. Old books give us a peek into the past and what life was like back then. What were the ideas, the philosophies of the people? What was society like? And learning from the past can guide us about the future. In fact, books are so important because they can distill information for us. We can learn from the best in the world, learn from other people's mistakes, and so that we don't make our own. Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast, the podcast where we evolve into the best versions of our lives, one awesome habit at a time. Now, as you know, I have authored 3 books this very year. So 3 books being published in this year. And people kept asking me, Ashdin, why did you write a book? In that matter, why did you write 3 books? Nobody reads anymore. And this is something that is very disturbing. In fact, so many people on my Instagram page keep messaging me and asking me to talk about the habit of reading. So I thought I would use this podcast to talk about this one habit that I use to read regularly. Last year, I finished reading about 106 books. My goal was 100. And I realized that it was so easy to go through books, not just in paperback form, but also as audiobooks. Because many of us are auditory, some of us are visual. We have to figure out what it is that we are. If you want to start reading regularly, there is one important mindset that you have to break before you can get into this habit of reading. You see, all through school, we were forced to read. Reading textbooks, reading was a chore, reading was a punishment. Standing up, reading to a whole class of people was scary. Oh my God, it was pure torture. I remember those moments. My entire hands would shake just talking to the class. We have been taught the mechanics of reading without understanding the purpose of reading. We were taught how to read, putting our finger underneath, reading it. But why we were reading was missing. If reading is still forced upon you, no habit will stick. The question is, you need to understand, why do you want to start reading? Is it because smart people read? Or do you hear some people saying that leaders are readers? I think we should all read because reading expands the mind. Reading gives you thoughts and ideas that you would have never otherwise imagined, that you would have never come up with. Reading makes the world make sense to you. Reading makes you disappear into a world that you create with yourself. Now, what is interesting is that very often we don't think of reading as a way of visualizing and using our creativity, especially now because we spend so much time on YouTube like this that we completely lose our ability to imagine and dream. The habit of reading starts by choosing a book. Now, what I normally tell people is don't choose a book that somebody just recommends. Choose a book that makes sense to you. Read one of the bestsellers or books that come highly recommended, but with an interest that you have. Very often, we start reading a book and we lose interest by page 10. Very often, we blame ourselves for not having the ability to read. However, I say it is the author's job to keep you occupied, to keep you interested in the book. So if you don't find a book riveting, stop it. Leave it, put it aside, because it's the author's job to keep you interested. So even if the books are bestsellers, chances are they're not really riveting. So don't blame yourself, blame the author instead. Tip number 2, start with a super thin book. I know so many people that start with a book that is this thick, 4 inches long. I mean, how can you ever finish that as your first book? Start with a thin book, get a few victories underneath your belt, win a few times, and then take it forward. This gives you the momentum to keep the wheels turning from one book to the next. So please do not start by reading War and Peace or, Sapiens or something big and heavy. Start a book that is small. I always talk about The Richest Man in Babylon or Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Who Moved My Cheese, The Alchemist. These are fantastic, small, very impactful books that you can all start with. Next, start by just reading 2 pages every day. If this is easy, after a week, move to 4. If you feel the urge to continue reading, read as much as you want, but don't feel pressurized into it. If you feel tired or bored, stop. You can also start by reading 1 habit a day. It's a great way of doing 1 chapter every single day, and in 31 days, you would have completed the book, and that would have been your first book. This is 1 habit a day, a book that I've written. Do check it out. It's available everywhere. It's available on Amazon as well. The final thing that I want to say is that this whole habit of reading is supposed to be a journey of enjoyment, a journey of entertainment. So a super simple habit to start reading is buy a thin, well-written book and take any of these suggestions. Sit down and just read 2 pages a day. Sit anywhere that you find which is cozy, that makes you feel safe, that makes you feel warm. You can sit by the window side, have your little coffee, your little chai with you. Enjoy this. Do not feel bored. Do not feel pressurized. Just because I said I finished 100-something books last year doesn't mean that you have to finish 100-something books. If this is your first book, start easy, start peacefully. But get into the habit of reading. Because what we don't realize is that a book is nothing but the distilled life of an author. That author took 45 years to learn what you are going to read in a month or 2. So I think that's a great investment. So think of books in this way, and you will never think of the habit of reading as something boring or dull. Improve your life. And finally, one of my favorite quotes is that a mind once expanded never shrinks back to its original size. So keep expanding your mind, reading books, and then see the habit transform you. I'm Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach. And remember, awesome lives start with awesome habits. If you like this episode, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, give us a rating. It really helps with people discovering the podcast. If you like podcasts like this, check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can also watch all the episodes on the Habit Coach Awesome 180 YouTube channel. Follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, everywhere. You can also reach out to me. I am Ashdin Doc at Twitter and Instagram. You can connect with me on my website, awesome180.com. You can also check out my 2 new books, Change Your Habits, Change Your Life, and the second, The Book of Good Habits for Kids. I am Ashdin Doctor, your habit coach.
IVM.